heavyweight prospect Michael Coffie wants to step up. He believes he's ready for the likes of Gerald Washington, Dominic Breazeale, or Charles Martin next. He said, quote, "I'd like to test myself against guys like Gerald Washington, Dominic Breazeale, or Charles Martin. I'd like to test myself against those kind of opponents. That would show me if I'm ready for the next step, which would be guys for the belt. I know a lot of people would feel otherwise, but it ain't about how they feel. It's about how I feel. My team and we know whether or not we're ready. I don't want to sound like I'm jumping the gun or anything, or downplaying the need for experience, but I don't think I'm that far off. I think I have power, movement, and I think just my style of fighting can really contend with anybody. When you're sparring somebody like Deontay Wilder, who is known for dropping people with one punch, there's always going to be that pressure. Somebody like him forces you to have to do things like be aware of where your hands are, head movement, getting the time and engaging the distance. So I take that, bring it into the ring, and it works to my benefit," end quote. So I like the confidence from Michael Coffie. He is in his 30s. On the telecast for his last fight, they said 31, but on BoxRec it says 34. Whatever the case may be, at that age, you can't afford to take your time. So despite his lack of experience, he's going to have to take the risk. He's going to have to jump out the window and see whether he has wings. There's no other way. And clearly, he has the confidence to try to do that. So yeah, let's see him in there against the Gerald Washington, or Dominic Breazeale, or Charles Martin. I have to imagine his management are going to have some say in who he fights next. They're probably more keen on the Gerald Washington fight rather than Breazeale or Martin. Breazeale, big and slow, limited, but he does have power and he does have heart. We all know that Dominic Breazeale's got heart. Gerald Washington, he's big, he's athletic, he's strong, but he's not the most ferocious heavyweight you've ever seen, okay, in terms of his tenacity and what have you. And I'm being polite there. Charles Martin, he showed a lot of heart against Adam Kalnacki, and he's been on a winning streak. So I would imagine that Charles Martin is probably the least likely of those three for Michael Coffie to be facing next. But perhaps Washington, then Breazeale. Charles Martin, of course, has been linked to Deontay Wilder. We don't know what's going on with that fight, whether they're going to go ahead with that. By the way, Charles Martin is, I think, #1 contender with the IBF. So if Deontay Wilder was to fight Charles Martin, potentially that could be some kind of eliminator, although I don't know whether Deontay Wilder's got a ranking with the IBF. The IBF, of all the sanctioning bodies, do tend to have a bit more credibility in terms of the way they rank fighters and the way they enforce mandatories and what have you. They're not infallible by any means, but compared to the other sanctioning bodies, they do seem to follow their own rules a bit more strictly. So maybe Wilder can't get a high enough ranking to get an eliminator against Charles Martin. I'll cover that in a different video. But for this video, Michael Coffie looking to fight Washington, Breazeale, or Martin. I take my hat off to him. He's obviously trying to move his career at a decent pace. He understands time is against him. And there's, he can't afford the luxury of taking his time. So for me, I think based upon what I've seen, Gerald Washington would be a very winnable fight for him. Dominic Breazeale would be more difficult because he's tenacious. Although Breazeale's been out the ring a long time. He hasn't fought since Wilder knocked him out, as far as I'm aware. So we don't know how the layoff could affect Breazeale. We don't know where his mind is at, right? It was a devastating knockout defeat, and that was in a personal fight. That wasn't just getting knocked out by some guy you don't necessarily have any issues with. No, they had personal beef. He promised his kids that he would knock out Deontay Wilder because Breazeale got attacked, according to him, by Wilder's entourage, by Wilder's brother, with his kids there. This was after Deontay Wilder's fight against, actually it was against Gerald Washington. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? The Gerald Washington fight. And I think it was at a hotel or whatever. Deontay Wilder and Dominic Breazeale had this confrontation. Breazeale was with his kids and I think his wife, and he got physically attacked. So it was a very personal thing for Dominic Breazeale to fight Deontay Wilder. So to then get wiped out the way that he did, that's got to hurt. That's got to be extra humiliating because you promised your kids you would get this guy back. And the guy wiped you out, you know. So we don't know where he's going to be at mentally. And more than anything, I think the ring rust could hurt him a lot. But yeah, that to me would be either any three of those fights would be interesting, but particularly the Breazeale fight. Just from a fan perspective, I would like to see the Breazeale fight. Breazeale has found people out before. He found out Amir Mansour. We forget this about Dominic Breazeale. He's found some people out. He found Amir Mansour out. Remember that? He also found out Izu Agono in a tremendous heavyweight fight a couple years back. Wasn't that the fight before he went into the Wilder fight? I can't remember whether that was, but it was a tremendous heavyweight scrap. If you haven't seen that on YouTube, go look up Dominic Breazeale versus Izu Agono. Fantastic fight. Agono was an unbeaten guy, trained by, I believe, Kevin Barry, Joseph Parker's trainer, or was a training partner of Joseph Parker for a long time. He went in there. He was really the more talented of the two in terms of athleticism and technique and all that. But he just didn't have the grit and the staying power of Dominic Breazeale. Breazeale ground him down, despite the fact that Breazeale took plenty of shots himself and it was a tough fight. Wasn't Breazeale down in that fight as well? I think he was, wasn't he? I swear Breazeale went down in that fight. He came through some very tough moments himself to eventually knock Izu Agono out. So he's found people out before. If Michael Coffie is going anywhere, he should be beating Dominic Breazeale. So I think that is a good test, you know. But if I got my manager's hat on, I'm probably going to go for Gerald Washington. But as a fan, I want to see the Breazeale fight. How he copes with Breazeale will tell us a lot about him, because Breazeale is usually stubborn. I know he got knocked out in one round by Wilder, but that fight aside, he's usually stubborn. He was stubborn in the AJ fight, stubborn against Izu Agono. You know, Amir Mansour, he got dropped in the Amir Mansour fight, got back up to win. So usually a very stubborn guy, and you pretty much got to nail him to the canvas to beat him. So yeah, Breazeale would be good for Michael Coffie. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Coffie is currently 12-0 with 9 KOs, 6'5", 83-inch reach from Brooklyn, New York, 34 years of age or 31, depending on who you believe. Last fight against Dominic Rock. I never actually knew that Dominic Rock was an Olympian. I'm surprised to learn that because he looked shocking. Like Dominic Rock did not look like Olympic material. Perhaps that's indicative of how poor the amateur scene is in America now. The fact that this guy was in the Olympics, 24 years of age. I mean, he looks 34. Certainly when you see him in the ring, he's in terrible shape. And I know that some heavier guys can fight, but this guy, to me, Dominic Rock, he doesn't look like any Andy Ruiz, that's for sure, based upon what I've seen. In fact, let me have a quick peek at his amateur record if I've got any of the highlights here. Okay. I don't really see many names on there that I recognize, truth be told. Oh, he fought Nathan Gorman. Okay, back in 2014. It says that was Nathan Gorman's debut. I guess that must have been his, what, international debut or something? It wouldn't have been his first fight ever. Obviously, that was in Bulgaria. Any other names? There are probably some top amateurs here, but I don't really follow amateur boxing like that anymore. Yeah, no other names I recognize. Dominic Rock is, of course, only 24, so it's an entirely new generation. But yeah, I was surprised to learn he's an Olympian because in the ring, he looked very unimpressive against Coffie. Despite being grossly overweight, there was nothing there in terms of his technique or anything he was doing. So yeah, surprised this guy's an Olympian. Doesn't look very good to me. Maybe he can redeem himself and win me over in the future, but we'll see about that. Let me know what you guys think about Michael Coffie. Are these good opponents for him to face next? Are they acceptable opponents? If so, how do you think he'll get along against any of them? Drop it all in the comments below. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. we dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.